And I think we're live. We should be all set. Howdy, howdy. Morning, everyone, indeed. Good morning, good morrow. Howdy, howdy. I should add something to my background. Add an additional thing. Sorry, I have to add something to my background really quick. Gotta remind people that YouTube Super Chats get first dibs. All right, I can update it later, but that's fine, I suppose. Righto, righto. Can we change prompts? Not today. We do science on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Them's the rules. Did you get your internet data issue squared away? No, but it resolves today, or it resets today, and I have plenty of data to get through the day. I do need to call them today, though. I need to call Cox Media and have them fix it, or have them upgrade. Have you let the wave function into your heart embrace many worlds wave function monism? Yes, yes, I have. How long did it take you to complete your PhD? 5 years after my master's. Discuss the power laws of Bitcoin. I'm not familiar with that. You must be fun at parties? Oh, I don't really go to parties all that often. The parties I do go to, though, I am fun at. Don't we do science every day? Well, that's fair. That is fair. Kill DXM has dibs. Fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you for the $2, Kill DXM. I appreciate you. Should I take AP Physics in high school even if I don't use it later in college? If you want to. I mean, that's a... So you've just decided to contribute nothing to actual science and do TikTok lives? Well, A, outreach is contributing to science. B, in the mornings, I do content creation because that's my primary source of income right now. And in the afternoons, I do research because that's my main interest. So, you know, we gotta have some income, and then we gotta do the work. Gotta pay the bills, right? Could you please use your powers to influence my friend into losing to me at golf? I hope that worked. Hi, I know this isn't science related, but I have a GED test today. Good luck. Good luck, Bartel. Do you believe in God? I don't. Is the math right on Big Bang Theory? You'd have to be more specific. But generally, yeah, they had a physicist as a consultant for that show. Physics versus engineering? What do you mean verse? Do you think we'll ever achieve perpetual motion? No, that breaks one of the fundamental laws of thermodynamics. Do you think we will have wireless power on a massive scale? No, it's just not super efficient. What's that diagram behind me? This, wherever it is, this is a Feynman diagram. And so what that Feynman diagram is related to is it's related to a calculation of electron-electron scattering. So we use Feynman diagrams to kind of organize a calculation for, the likelihood that an electron and an electron will scatter off each other. We use these Feynman diagrams to organize the calculations in like a nice, clean way. Have you done algebraic topology? I have not. Does money transform like a tensor? Yeah, it's a scalar. Do you study in philosophy? Not so much. Not explicitly, anyway. If physics is deterministic, is quantum randomness fundamental or just incomplete info? It could be that there's not actually quantum randomness at all, and rather it's just, many worlds. It could just be that the many worlds interpretation is true, in which case there's no randomness at all. There's just a lot of worlds, each one equally realized. If photons have mass, do you think there's a solid state to photons? Photons don't have mass. in what field do you specialize in? I do differential geometry and relativity. Um, Thoughts on paper drop of three-dimensional time possibility? Yeah, so that paper is not really being taken seriously. The paper it was published, or the journal it was published in, is like a really, like, they accept anything. Um, and so I'm just not even gonna worry about it, and I don't think you should either. Why is GR so resistant to quantization? Because it's like maximally nonlinear. Um, can massless entities have momentum? Yes, photons do. Too bad the Earth is flat. That's a funny joke. Funny joke. If the universe is expanding, what is it expanding into? I have a video on this from somewhat recently about like it kind of involves Pac-Man and it uses that as an analogy. But essentially, it's not expanding into anything. Expansion is like a local thing. It doesn't matter what's going on near the edges. In particular, the universe doesn't have edges. Is grad school outside the US easier or harder to get into, in your opinion? I didn't apply to any grad schools outside of California, even, so I can't comment, unfortunately. Are you looking for more gigs? No, TikTok pays decently enough that I can cover my expenses, um, and then, rely on some of my savings while I still have time to do research for the next few months so that I can apply for the next cycle for jobs. Um, any short good books on DEs to understand Griffith's Intro to Quantum Mechanics better? Not that I know of, but I'm not super familiar with like intro math textbooks. Flat out spherical Earth? Yes, of course. Oh, flat ore. Yeah, of course the Earth is a sphere. Of course. Do you know how JWST blocks a star to look at its planets? Is that an interference thing? It's called there's a word for it. I think they literally put something in the way though, but I don't know much about the instrumentation of the JWST. Have you read anything about the three-body problem under GR? We can't even solve the two-body problem under GR. Quantum tunneling possible on a scale large enough to be applicable for everyday life? No. No, it's just too many particles. It'd be too unlikely. Do you think the theory that the universe is within a black hole is plausible? Is it plausible? Maybe, but it's not even a theory because we don't even have like the mathematics of what we would expect to see if that were the case. So we can't even say that it's like true or false. Like it's not even at the point where we can even examine it. Can you explain different types of spaces like Einstein, like Hilbert, Euclidean vector spaces? So look, so a vector space is just it's a topological, or it's a set with a topology. I need to explain this more simply. A vector space is a collection of all possible different vectors, and by vectors I just mean things that you can add together and that you can multiply by a number. So in particular, numbers are vectors, and you can also subtract them from each other. But you can also think of vectors as like a distance and a direction. So you can take a direction, and then you can add on a direction. You can go in a Sorry, somebody's spamming. You can go a direction for a distance and then go another direction for another distance, and that's the same as going in like the added direction for a distance. So that's what a vector space is. Now, Euclidean space is a vector space with additional structure. It has a metric, which tells you how to measure distances across between places rather than locally at a point with vectors. In fact, the standard vector space that you learn about when you're doing like normal vector stuff in linear algebra, that is a Euclidean space. A Hilbert space is a type of vector space, and it's equipped with something called an inner product, meaning that you can basically multiply two vectors together and spit out a number. If matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed, was the universe ever created? Matter can be destroyed really easily. It happens in your kitchen if you own bananas, and energy conservation is what you're alluding to, but even that's not quite so true because energy conservation only holds in certain kinds of spacetimes, and our universe doesn't happen to be that kind of spacetime. Instead of the universe expanding, what if the speed of causality is slowing down? So you're saying what if C is getting smaller? Well, I mean, I guess you could examine that model. I'd have to think about the implications. Is warp drive really possible? Probably not, because it requires negative energy density. Can you explain diffraction of light? Yeah, so light is a wave, and so waves can add together to get bigger, or they can kind of cancel out to get smaller. And so all that happens with diffraction is, and diffraction is just a type. All that happens with diffraction is that typically you have the light wave traveling in a direction, but if some of it's blocked, then the stuff that was adding together to make it continue going in the same direction, some of that gets removed, and so the other stuff doesn't get canceled out in the same way, so it can bend around corners. This involves the Huygens principle, which is basically that the point of each wavefront can be viewed as a spherical wave. Can you explain how you measure a particle spin? With magnetic field, typically. Have you heard of gravistars? Yeah, I have a video on them. Does sound travel faster through the absence of light? You mean when it's dark? I don't think so. Tips for preparing for physics PhD. There's not much to prepare for. If you did okay and if you did well enough in undergrad, then you'll be okay. Just take the classes. Are mathematical simulations of inspiring black holes good enough to match observed gravitational waves? Yeah, they're pretty good. Can you explain what a chronon particle is? It sounds like sci-fi. If all physical laws are time-symmetric, why does time only move forward for us? Not all physical laws are time-symmetric. So the weak nuclear force is not time-symmetric, importantly. But that's a good question, and it seems to have something to do with entropy. Namely that if the that what we think of as the direction of time's flow, that seems to be the direction that entropy increases in. If time stops, will you be able to see by moving through space so the paused light gets in your eye? Again, sci-fi. I can't really answer sci-fi questions because it's about suspending the laws of physics. Does relativity work in the way it does due to human perception? No, it has nothing to do with human perception. What medium does light travel through? Through the electromagnetic field. What are some experiments, observations, and models that can help us better understand the grand unification epoch? You would need basically giant particle colliders, or you can use kind of natural sources like that, where, like if you have cosmic rays, you could use cosmic rays because those can function like enormous particle colliders. But yeah, essentially you just need giant particle colliders, really high energy stuff. How much more could we know if resources were pooled and science was prioritized as opposed to needing grants and donations in U.S. federal budget going towards imperialism? A lot more. At least we would know a lot more faster. If I wore a metal suit and had a magnet with a fish pole at the end, could I use the magnet? No, you cannot. Did logic exist before time? I don't know what it means to say that logic exists, so I don't know the answer. That's a philosophy question. When physics has philosophical implications, do you have a preference for certain approaches? Materialism, physicalism, panpsychism? I have a preference for physicalism, interpreted to mean as physicalism says that the things that have ontological status are the things that you can do physics to. Which is kind of circular. Can CERN potentially open a wormhole? No. Is dark matter sci-fi? No. It's as far as we can tell, it's a real thing. Can I increase my volume? That I can. How's that? Hope that's better. What are some, would the Andromeda paradox also apply to objects on the other side of our galaxy? Yep, it applies to anything that is sufficiently far away. What does it mean for something to be quantum? Well, things generally aren't quantum. We talk about like quantum systems, and that's just any system that is better described by quantum mechanics than by classical mechanics. Which is to say, and typically such quantums or such systems are small, because over large scales, the kind of quantum behavior averages out to give more classical behavior. How come there's so many elements if they all came from the Big Bang? Well, look, so not all of the elements did come from the Big Bang. Roughly 3 of them did, maybe 4, depending on how much you consider a rounding error. So hydrogen came from the Big Bang. Hydrogen is just protons and electrons. Helium came from the Big Bang because those protons can fuse, produce neutrons, and then you can have helium. A tiny bit of lithium and an even smaller amount of beryllium were formed during Big Bang nucleosynthesis. The rest have been made by stars and their corpses. Could you explain what a derivative is, please? I need this for my calculus class. It's the instantaneous rate of change. So just think about like how quickly it's changing, and then just make the time over which the thing is changing smaller and smaller. What's the opposite of quantum? There's not really an opposite, but maybe classical. Is the volume a little bit better? What's the biggest mystery in physics to me? I'd like to know what the deal is with dark energy. That's like my big question right now. Can you explain space-time at the Planck scale? No, nobody can. We don't know. We don't know how it is. Is life like mathematics? There's no set answer, but instead a bunch of formulas that form the answer. I don't know what that sounds like you're asking about a metaphor. Opinions on theoretical computer science? I don't have an opinion on it. I don't think about it a lot. How do you feel about the theory that space-time is a superfluid? Isn't that from the Big Bang Theory? I don't know if it's like a real thing. How does it feel to be taught only what the man wants you to know? Well, being a physicist means that you're not being taught, you're the one doing the teaching, right? That's the whole business. Explain what it is to be a mathematical physicist. What it means is that I am interested in physics problems, and I approach it from a mathematical point of view, meaning that I write theorems and such. Also, I sometimes just do pure mathematics. Fear's interaction with the $10. Thank you. If I were given a massive dose of gamma rays and it didn't give me superpowers, what would actually happen? Oh, you'd die. You'd get cancer and die. It depends on how massive. You could have acute radiation poisoning, in which case you would just die in like weeks. Or you could, if it was a smaller dose, then you could just feel really sick for a while and then you'd get cancer and then die later. GB with the $5. Thank you. What is meant by indivisible stochastic processes in quantum theory? So if I'm understanding your question precisely, what you're asking is that we can't like zoom in on the stochastic things that happens in quantum mechanics and get something that's not stochastic, get something that's not random. The point is that as far as we can tell, if you take the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, that there is nothing fundamental lying beneath the genuinely random features of quantum mechanics. So it could just be that our universe is intrinsically stochastic rather than just stochastic on average because we are missing some information. That's the idea. Do you like pure math or physics more? My heart is in physics, but my abilities are in math. Let's put it that way. Would quantum entanglement be outside of time? Would quantum entanglement have access to future, past, and present? Quantum entanglement is a feature of quantum systems which exist in time. Silly space religion preacher. It's a weird thing to say. What's the best research you've worked on? You mean like the most cited? Probably my dissertation. My dissertation work has been cited like 20 times or something like this. So that's probably the thing with the most citations that I have. If you could have an answer to any question, what question would you have answered? I'd like to know what a theory of quantum gravity is. Like what the theory of quantum gravity is. What do you think about quantum mechanics and what it claims to solve? I don't know what that question means. Like, look, quantum mechanics works. It makes really good predictions about the world around us. Are paradox-free time travel solutions possible in general relativity? Yeah, I have a video on it. And actually, yeah, so I didn't post it recently, but I do have a video on it, yeah. Can you explain to us why you're gatekeeping your hair care secrets? Look, my hair just looks like this because it's kind of wet. I got out of the shower recently. Is it really a coincidence that the moon appears to be a similar size as the sun from our perspective? Absolutely, yeah. Morgan Hunter with the $5. Thank you. I appreciate your non-political conversations. I'm curious if you have spent any time developing a theory on quantum gravity. I have, yeah. I have a paper that I published a year ago or so, in a quantum or on quantum gravity. It's not like a unique theory that I like came up with that's brand new. It's just an investigation of like how we can use quantum gravity to study the cosmological constant problem. So yeah, I absolutely do. Hi, does dark energy expand the space within our galaxy but is overwhelmed by gravity? No, so it doesn't expand it because of the gravity. So the thing is in order for the space to expand, that dark energy has to be dominant, but because dark energy isn't dominant, the space doesn't expand. If I injected a large amount of hydrogen into a closed container of water, would hydronium form? I don't know, that's a chemistry question. Do you know any information about how organic matter was created for inorganic matter? That's a biology or chemistry question. I know a little bit about it, but that's not because I'm an expert in the field or anything. Why does space-time bend with mass? That's like asking why do like charges repel each other. It seems to just be a law of physics, but maybe there's a more fundamental reason. Accepting guests today? Maybe. Depends on how the chat questions go. Have you read the 3 time dimensions paper? No, and I don't plan to. Apparently, it was not accepted into a good journal, which is really, which says something about the quality of the work. So, you know, it seems kind of fringe. Is energy constant because it's perpetual or because it's simultaneously being born and dying? Energy is not a thing, it's not a substance. Energy is a number, and it's a number that we use to characterize systems that behave in certain ways. Now, it happens to be that that is a number that stays the same in certain kinds of systems, so we call energy as conserved, or it's constant. But more generally, energy, it doesn't have to be conserved. In our universe, on a cosmic scale, it isn't. He's preaching faith-based ideals. I'm just talking about physics, my guy. You might be on the wrong live. Shay asks, was Einstein a Jew? Well, I guess, yeah. The mathematical probability the moon appears the same size as the sun is impossible. Well, it's not. Probabilities aren't impossible. Probabilities are numbers. But no, I mean, like, it used to be closer to the Earth, and so it appeared larger. Now it's further from the Earth, so it appears smaller, and in the future it'll appear even further, and hence even smaller. I'm curious, what is a neutron star material? How does it be so heavy? Look, so it's basically just pure neutrons, at least once you go below the crust. And it's nuclear matter, so the nucleus of an atom is really, really dense. And so just imagine that you just had one giant nucleus of an atom. That's sort of what a neutron star is like. Do you believe in string theory? No. But even in string theory, things aren't energy. Energy is just a property of the strings. Energy is a belief to what the new space religion is claiming. This guy's crazy. What a wild guy. Are electrons the only particles that have orbitals? No, it seems to be the case that protons and neutrons also have orbitals in the nucleus. It's just they're a lot harder to describe. What do you think about theory that our consciousness is quantum? I'm not convinced, but you know, I'm open-minded. What if we discovered faster than light speed particles? That'd be fascinating, but we haven't, and we have reason to think that they can't exist. The ancients would have laughed at our current level of knowledge. They didn't have electricity, bud. Okay. How is Einstein's theory important for GPS systems? Yeah, so Einstein's both special and general relativity are relevant for GPS. So a GPS satellite is at a different altitude than us. So the gravitational potential that it experiences is different from us, which means that time will flow differently because of the gravitational system it's in. Time will flow differently, and because it's an issue of timing, its timing needs to match the timing on the ground. So it has to make corrections for the fact that it's at a higher altitude. Second, it's also moving very, very fast because it's orbiting. And so that's also going to have an effect due to Einstein's special theory of relativity. So it has to make a correction for that as well. What physics books do you recommend for someone interested in learning the basics? This book. I cite it every single live. A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. Great book. Do you think we need to rethink the Big Bang or its timeline due to JWST? No, doesn't seem to be the case. Ancients did have electricity, Baghdad batteries. No, they had batteries. They didn't have electricity. Electricity is far more complicated than just batteries. Anyway, they didn't have lasers. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have MRI machines. They didn't have, a theory of gravity. They didn't have any of this stuff. How come people believe in thermodynamics and perpetual motion is not real when the Earth spins? So, perpetual motion specifically is not just about conservation of something, right? The reason the Earth spins is because of conservation of angular momentum. But even then, the Earth's spin is slowing. It will not spin perpetually. So even then, it's not the case that the Earth is a perpetual motion machine. It's just very, very long-lived. Are the Feynman lectures really worth a read-through? I haven't read through them, so I don't know, but I've heard good things, even though they weren't actually written by Feynman. If you could take the speed of light loop and come back with a much older Earth, would you do it? I don't know. That's a hard question. Miss Cleo teach you this? No. Bro is saying the ancients have more technical typing on the phone. Yeah, right? What part of the brain are flat earthers with? Don't be mean. How far can you get in physics without going to university or college? You can't. You can't really. Is it more logical to believe everything? Okay, there's just some more religious questions. Can you explain walking versus running in rain making you different levels of wet when reaching a destination the same distance away? No, I can't. Because as far as I'm concerned, it should be the same. But that's from an ideal physics perspective, not from an engineering point of view. What do you think of the shape of the Earth? It's obviously a sphere, and all of the evidence points to it being a sphere. Any interesting news coming out of the physics community recently? Nothing that I've noticed. Is it possible for light to exist on its own? Yeah, sure. It's if you could travel at the speed of light, Does it feel like you get to the destination instantly? Well, things with mass, including us, can't travel at the speed of light. What we can do is we can travel very, very close to the speed of light, and it'll feel like we got there very, very quickly, yes. What was the hardest math on your journey? I don't know, probably like algebraic geometry or something. Reverend J. Danger, great name, with the $2. Thank you. The Baghdad battery was for papyrus preservation. I haven't heard that before, but okay. Good information. Can QFT be used to study bound states? Yeah, I think so. I think you could study, yeah, absolutely. You can study like bound states of positrons or like electron-positron bound states, for example. Um, yeah, definitely. It's just complicated for more complicated bound states, yeah. What percent of the universe's mechanism do we understand? It's impossible to answer that question. From Garba Gaiman with the 10 Canuck bucks, thank you so much. How do we know that relativity of simultaneity isn't just an illusion or artifact? E.g., like how objects at relativistic speeds appear stretched or compressed. So all of these things can just be experimentally determined, right? So we can measure differences in the rate at which time flows as a result of gravity or as a result of motion. This has been done. We can measure, or rather, we can use we can make predictions using the Lorentz contraction. This is the smushing of a thing approaching the speed of light. We use that fact to make predictions about the behavior of atoms in particle accelerators, and the predictions come back true. Similarly, the relativity of simultaneity is just a consequence of those, basically. I'm not actually sure if we've done experiments for relativity of simultaneity, but they follow directly from those two features. Let's Google experiments. So to be clear, it's been indirectly observed, of course, but I just don't know if it's been directly observed. I guess the Sagnac effect is could sort of be considered that, but perhaps not. Do you think the universe had a beginning? I'm agnostic on it, but I lean no. Measuring based on optical. Okay, that's another flat earther. Why don't you believe in string theory? Well, look, it's a good idea, but it predicts supersymmetric particles, and we haven't seen those yet, so I don't know. There's just not evidence supporting it. Quantum mechanics, if EE were energy squared. Okay, quantum coherence is only lost when which path information is in principle available. Not really. It's when an interaction occurs. That's the kind of like the mainstream view anyway, is that when an interaction with a macroscopic system and a microscopic system occurs, then you lose quantum coherence. And that's a result of entanglement between the macroscopic system and the microscopic system, where basically the superposition kind of like diffuses out to the macroscopic system, which becomes more statistical rather than coherent. C-Bar with the $1, thank you. Are government mandated rank up throwers real? Yes. How seriously should we take semi-classical gravity like Einstein tensor equals T mu? Well, considering I'm writing a paper that's implementing semi-classical gravity, I think that you should take it seriously, yeah. Thoughts on triple C cyclic universe? Basically, the only people who take it seriously these days, this is Penrose's conformal cyclic cosmology, is Penrose. That said, I think it's a really beautiful idea. So I'm not gonna take a dump all over it. String theory has been dead for many years. Well, that's not true. It's not dead. I just don't think it's true about our universe. Do you believe in mind over matter, or that stuck emotions energy cause health problems? Well, so psychology does affect your health, but I don't think that has anything to do with physics. Huh. Hey, we rotate around the sun, so is that the default plane of our solar system? Absolutely it is. Do you think we could be living in a simulation? No, I don't think so. I made a video about this a while ago, but the basic gist is that the original conception of this simulation hypothesis, it kind of relies on the idea that, like, well, if we can make simulations that are, like, nearly identical to our own, then there's no reason to think that we aren't a simulation created by some more advanced version of humans that are nearly identical to us. But the thing is in our universe, it's impossible to make such a simulation. It just requires too much energy. And you can prove this. This is not a technological issue. This is a physics issue. And so if we can't do the simulation, then there's no reason to think that we are a simulation. Did you know NASA has a larger movie studio than all of Hollywood? Okay, we're doing moon landing denial? Cool. Do explosions create order? I mean, in principle they can, but like the Big Bang wasn't an explosion, so it's not really relevant anyway. Do you know why so many people prefer dark matter over modified Newtonian dynamics or modified gravity? Dark matter is a more predictive and cleaner theory. That's why. Um, do you think we reach a point in science during our lifetime where we can produce harness negative mass? No, I don't know if we. I don't know any good reason to think that negative mass would exist. Um, do we know the reason why our universe ended up with more matter than antimatter? No, that's an open question, and it's one of the most important open questions. Hi, will you please explain time dilation like I'm a fourth grader using the spaceship example? Yeah, so the easy explanation is that everything travels through space-time at the same rate, and so traveling through space faster means that you travel through time slower. That's kind of like the easy explanation, but it doesn't explain why it's time symmetric. That's a little bit deeper, but for a fourth grader, probably that explanation is enough. What do you think about Majorana 1? Well, considering that Microsoft lied about it, I'm not so convinced. I'm not too sold on it. Working on anything right now? Yeah, I'm working on a cyclic universe model. That relies on semi-classical gravity. Do we know where dark matter comes from? No, we don't even know what it is. Just because we can't do it doesn't mean it can't be done. There's so many variables we don't know and can't see truly, we can't be entirely sure of anything. Well, that's kind of a useless point of view. The point is that we have no reason to believe that negative mass matter could possibly exist. How can you measure your own body's frequency? Bodies don't have frequencies. Like a human person doesn't have a frequency. It's not a thing. Where did the elements that made up the Big Bang come from? The Big Bang wasn't made of elements. It wasn't made of atoms. Where did the element? Okay, I already answered that. Where the universe began from nothing. What encoded the rules that allowed it to begin? Well, I don't think that the universe began from nothing. So, are there any research projects you want to do in the future? I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants, if you will. Cyclical universe theory explained like in 5 or give a high view on that? No, because it is secret. Because I'm writing a paper and I don't want the ideas to be, stolen, if you will. But I'm actually like the progress is actually going pretty quickly, so I'm hoping to publish it, to upload it, maybe by the end of the month. The James Webb Telescope keeps finding galaxies that we didn't know about. Do any of those change the calculations for dark matter? Not really. We can't. They're too small and too faint for us to be able to figure out anything about dark matter for those galaxies specifically. Eric with $10. Thank you. If an infinite culture has been counting generations, could they ever actually have a number for the current generation? So look, counting means if you're counting, that just means that somebody started counting. So you can't. I don't think it's plausible to say that you could have look, in order to count, that means that somebody must have at one point been counted one, right? If you're ever at a finite number, which just means that there couldn't have been a person who was first counting. That's the point. Bodies don't have frequencies explained. Yeah, like the whole what's you got to attune your frequency. That's like hocus. That's like hokum. That's like bogus, hokum, all that stuff. Does carbon dating work? Absolutely. So carbon dating is really interesting. It's hard to do, but yeah. But the point of carbon dating is that you can approximate how much carbon-14 was in the Earth's atmosphere at any given time. Plants in particular breathe in CO2. They respire. And so because they respire, they take in carbon and incorporate it into their trunk or whatever, into their plant material. And some of that carbon is going to be C14. Now, if you know how much C14, if you know the ratio of C14 to C12, which is the stable version of carbon, if you know those ratios at the time when the plant died, then you can then you can just look at the amount of C14 that's left over when you dig up the tree or the plant or whatever. And because you know the rate at which the C14 decayed, you can now look at the new ratio compared to the original ratio, and you can work out an age. What's the most convincing piece of evidence against the smooth space-time at the Planck scale? Well, it depends on what, I mean, there's theoretical evidence. That's essentially what it is. Namely that we expect that that anything that exists at the Planck scale, so any photons that are, any virtual photons, for example, which don't exist, but we can treat them as if they exist. We expect that virtual photons, or really any field excitation that exists at the Planck scale, would collapse into a black hole. So you would expect to have black holes like evaporating basically and being really unstable. So that's the theoretical justification, or one of them anyway. Please explain the frequency thing. Oh, I already answered that. Why hasn't anyone tried to recreate Tesla's tower? It's called a Tesla coil. We can do it. It's a waste of time. It's not very efficient. Everything you were saying is not the absolute conclusion. Okay. Do you own your own home? No, I don't. My wife and I will probably be moving a lot in the next few years, so we're not going to buy a home yet. There are flaws in this methodology, though. Carbon dating can only provide reliable dates up to 50,000 years. Yeah, that's true. That's why we don't use carbon dating for things that are older than that. And the reason for that is because the amount of carbon, the amount of C14 in a sample decays. It like halves. It reduces by 50% every 5,600 years or something like that, which means that after 56,000 years or whatever, it would have decreased by 2 to the 10th, by a factor of 2 to the 10th, which just makes it very, very hard to detect to begin with. How accurate is carbon dating? In conjunction with other chronology measuring tools, it can be very accurate. Why is in the air more pressure on the bottom than on top? Oh, that's just because of gravity. So you have a whole bunch of stuff on top that has weight, and it's pushing down on the stuff below it. What got you into physics? It was black holes. Just black holes are cool. Dark matter and energy is electromagnetic in temperature. The coldest temperature is ice, and the hottest temperature is electromagnetic. Okay. That doesn't seem stable. How does chaos theory work in a universe governed by laws? Chaos theory isn't undeterministic. Chaos theory is unpredictable. And what that means is that literally the mathematics, there doesn't exist mathematics to predict the outcome given. So, okay, let me back up. When we talk about mathematical chaos, which is what chaos theory is about, what this means is that if you change the input parameters of some system just a tiny bit, the outcome is hugely different. And that's not random. It's just because the system is unstable. From Fears Interaction, thank you for the $10. Again, given access to all available tech today, how would you go about investigating dark matter or energy? And do you know what's currently being done to investigate it? The thing is like, we're doing it. Like, we have enormous detectors in, say, Antarctica that are just looking for like just the slight chance that like something that we just detect something from space that's dark matter. Similarly, people have been like, we're building, or at least we were building bigger and bigger particle colliders in the hopes that maybe it's just some heavy particle that's stable. The point is that like, and people are also looking for like microlensing from primordial black holes. People are looking. It's just, the thing is depending on what dark matter is, it might be very hard to impossible to detect even in principle. For example, if dark matter is some kind of, if it's like a sterile neutrino, then it would be impossible to detect directly. If it's some other fundamental particle that doesn't interact with the standard model at all and is stable, then it would be impossible to detect. So unfortunately, that might be the reality that we live in. I hope not, because then we'd be stuck with mystery forever. What do you think about the Majorana 1 chip? Microsoft lied about it. Kip Thorne couldn't answer this. How many times does spacetime wrap around Sagittarius A star? Kip Thorne couldn't answer that because that's not a question with an answer. Spacetime doesn't wrap around stuff. Is there a non-random causation for the uncertainty principle? Yeah, absolutely. The uncertainty principle is a result of the fact that everything is waves. All particles are waves, or at least they can be described as waves. And the relationship between momentum and frequency, or the momentum and wavelength, is a proportional one. So if you have a wave that's very stretched out, has a lot of bumps, then that means that you can't really tell where it is, but you do know the distance between the bumps very, very well because you can measure it a bunch of times. And so that gives you a high degree of certainty in its momentum, but a low degree of certainty in its position. Similarly, if a wave is just one bump, then you can't really measure the distance between bumps because, they're all, there's only one. But you can figure out where it is. So you have a high degree of certainty, low degree of certainty in the number of bumps. How old were you when you read A Brief History of Time, and did you understand it at first read? I think I was like 11, and I don't know if I understood it, but I definitely felt like I did. Um, $2 from Hey Bale, thank you. Can you explain electric universe theory? It's pseudoscience, so there's not much to explain. They just think that gravity's fake, and they think that everything's electricity and magnetism, which is just demonstrably false. Um, like we can explicitly account for electric and magnetic effects when measuring gravitational forces on, things in laboratories, and once you account for that, there's still a gravitational force that we measure. Opinion on the fall of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Well, perhaps it led to my family being in the United States, so I don't have a negative opinion of it. Toby, with the Galaxy, thank you so much. I wish that you guys could send messages with GIFs, because then I could read them on TikTok too. Um, have you ever thought of explaining things to children and how that would improve content? Well, most my audience is not children, so it wouldn't. I don't know what you would mean by improve content, but it wouldn't improve my audience. My audience would not like it. How upset do you get when people misunderstand the observer effect and apply it to crystal logic? I get very sad. Electricity is the only thing that has definite direction. Gravity has a direction. How hard was physics for you? Not particularly, otherwise I wouldn't have gotten a PhD in it. In order to observe the passing electrons, the observer used light to see where the electrons went from the slit, but that light itself influenced that passing. I don't know if that's a question. But by the way, that's like a thought experiment. As far as I know, like, we don't actually bounce light off of the electrons physically. Like, that's not how it's actually done in a lab. What's the most accurate image to how people see you? Mirrors, selfies, I don't know. That's a question for a photographer. Where should I go to learn physics? A university. Sagittarius A star wraps spacetime around by frame dragging, which is a function of mass and speed. 94%, 94 the speed of light is a spin, 400 million sums. No, it doesn't. It doesn't wrap spacetime around it. Frame dragging is a relationship between time and essentially angular displacement, but it's not like a static wrapping. Sapphic Catalina, thank you for the galaxy. I appreciate you. Hopefully I can see your question if you have one. Now it is twisted, but it's not like wrapped around. It'd be impossible. Like, space-time is the thing where Sagittarius A star is, so you couldn't like measure how, like, relative to what would space-time be wrapped around it. It's not really a question that's well posed. DIY art and craft. You cannot be spamming. Can I come up and ask a question? Yeah, sure. Let's bring up a guest. Toby, how's it going?
Hey, it's going okay.
Glad to hear it. What you got for me?
I've been enjoying physics as a hobby, and I would like to learn more. And I do have that book, so I'm gonna actually
Good,
read
you
it.
should read it. It's excellent.
Um, but I was wondering, would it be possible for there to be a dimension of total entropy? Like,
I don't know what that means.
yeah, I honestly I don't either. In my head, it would be like almost like a medium that our universe exists within, where like maybe a previous universe had been and it had reached like heat death and everything had entropied, and we're like our universe kind of went on like I've been reading that like there's a possibility that black holes can spawn universes, so like a universe before ours.
So, as far as we can tell, our universe is everything. That's kind of what the word universe means, right? So the
Right.
question is does it exist in a medium? Well, in a sense, yeah, but like that medium space-time in some sense. That's
Right.
at least like the classical view that like everything in the universe is just like hanging out in space-time. Now,
Right. And well, yeah, I did
could
have I had sorry, I had a follow up for that.
sure, go ahead.
Um, uh, I had this was like all hypothetical and like probably none of it's true, but uh, because I had thought of like, well, what about the Leidenfrost effect in that scenario? Could that
Which
explain
scenario?
something like that we're in a medium of something that has reached total entropy, and so like would
So look, the issue is that like it doesn't really make sense to talk about the universe being in a medium. Um,
Mhm.
like that's like you could say that like even suppose that the universe is in a black hole, right? Then that black hole is just in another universe with space time, with stars presumably, and so on and so forth. Like the notion of a universe being like I can't I don't even conceptually I don't even know what you mean by that.
Well,
Um,
because for example, you're even saying in another universe, and but you're also saying the universe is everything. So is that other universe just not another universe? It's just our
yeah,
universe
so
sorted in on
so
itself.
this is sort of like this is an equivocation of terms that kind of gets lost. So if our universe is in a black hole, what that just means is that what we think of the universe is actually far larger than we think. Um,
Yeah.
and then that just means that the universe is the bigger thing. um, but so the more precisely, I could say something like if our observable universe is within a black hole, then the universe as a whole is much different and much larger than we thought. But
Right. Mhm.
but that just means that like it's not like a thing. It wouldn't be like a bubble floating, or it wouldn't be like a blob of jello like hanging out in water. It would
Yeah.
just be
Yeah.
like a bigger universe that we are
Right.
just in a small region of.
And I'm thinking more along the lines of like time, right? Like so maybe it's like a time in our universe where we have reached total entropy and it's all just kind of falling in on itself. I guess that's kind of what I mean. So it's like the universe encapsulating itself. That's but my thing would my whole thing is it wouldn't be observable. That's the whole thing. Even if it did
I
exist.
don't even conceptually understand what you're getting at though. That's the problem. Like
Mm,
like time is like so we think of space time as being like a thing. Like it's a whole space time. And so like the universe doesn't exist in time. Time is part of the universe, right?
yeah.
Um so it's not like some external thing that the universe is like going through, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I know
Um
it's a yeah, I understand that it's difficult to understand, but the whole reason I wanted to just bear with me for a second. Just
sure.
imagine that our universe is a bubble in this medium of total entropy, right? My thing is if it's total entropy, that means it's at 0 Kelvin, correct?
No, that would be minimum entropy.
Minimum entropy. Oh,
Minimum
okay.
entropy is absolute zero.
Then maybe that's what I mean. What I'm getting at is it's at a temperature at which the fact that our universe even exists, it creates this sort of Leidenfrost effect.
So the
In
Leidenfrost
which
effect only happens because you have gases or things are able to move through gases more easily than they can move on objects. Gases basically minimize friction. But like
Mhm.
there's no friction in empty space, right? So it's not really
Right. Okay. Okay.
like if the
And,
universe were floating around in empty space, it wouldn't be like a Leiden like if our universe was a bubble in an otherwise empty universe,
and that's not.
then
Yeah, I know
then the
that's not what
Leidenfrost
it
effect
is.
isn't super relevant. No.
Okay, I was just trying to figure out. Like, I was just thinking that could be what the Higgs field is like a space between our like the hot part of the universe and like a part of a cold part of the universe that we can't even recreate. And
So the
then
Higgs field is something that exists in our universe, right?
right.
Measurably. Like we
Well,
can like
yeah,
it
it's
must
all in
exist
our
in our universe.
yeah. And so I'm not trying to say it's anything like outside of the universe. It's just I'm trying to explain it that way to create a visualization, if that makes sense.
I think that the visualization will not work. But who knows? I mean, if
That's
it
why
was
I'm asking.
formalized better, I might be able to understand it more. But I'm
Yeah,
gonna let you
yeah.
go so I can answer some more questions from chat.
No
But
worries.
thanks for being
Thank you.
here. Take care.
Yeah.
And by the way, we got a $20 cash app from Rob for the great content. Thank you so much. All right, did I miss any super chats? I don't think I did. No, I did not. All right, let's go back to answering chat. Does time have a beginning? It's not clear. It's not clear if time has had a beginning. I'm kind of agnostic on it, but I lean towards no. Are looking for another postdoc or a tenure track position? Either or, but postdoc seems more likely. I heard 7 was the biggest number. What about 8 then? Well, 8's just 1 in disguise. Will we become a phase 5 civilian Kardashev scale? Not as humans. I suspect not as humans, no. Do you have a favorite physicist, scientist? It's got to be the GOAT, Einstein. You can't argue with ego mind on charge. What? How do you feel about the responsibility of educators in combating pseudoscience? I think that we need to do it. I think that's really important. Do you think actual infinities exist, or is Hilbert or Brouwer right in denying it? I think that they at least in principle can. I don't know if they do, but I think that they can. How fast would time flow in standard Earth seconds if a mass of 1,000 kilograms with no outs for a mass of 1,000 kilograms with no outside forces? How fast would it flow relative to what? And in what setting is this mass of 1,000 kilograms? If space is expanding at an increasing rate, does that impact perceived time? No, actually. The time is unchanged. It's the space that's changing. We were talking about the double slit experiment, how light chooses its state as a particle or wave. It's always a wave. It's just, it's always a wave. It's just sometimes more of a localized wave. You're handsome for a trans man. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not trans, though. But I appreciate the compliment. Even if it was intended as a backhanded compliment, I appreciate you thinking that I have good features. By the way, trans men tend to have a lot better skin than cis men do. And, I wish sometimes that, I had that good skin. All right, I should probably mute this person because they're spamming it. Can you explain what a wave function is? Yeah, so a wave function is just a mathematical description of essentially a wave, and it happens to be that that wave describes a quantum system. And the wave follows something called the Schrodinger equation. That's it. What's the weirdest phenomenon in physics we don't completely understand? Maybe dark energy. Dark energy is really weird. You look like an engineer. I'm not an engineer. How dare you? No, I'm kidding. What's the actual difference, if any, between black hole entropy and thermodynamic entropy? Black hole entropy... We don't know, actually. Maybe they're identical. But if they were identical, then you would say that gravity should be entropic. But gravity doesn't seem to be entropic, so... Yeah, it's not clear. Did I just get a message somewhere? Anyway. What do you think about pilot wave theory? I'm not convinced of it. I think that it adds an extra equation that we've never proven. So, not convinced. Is there a way to define global energy and general relativity? Only if the space-time under consideration has a time-like killing vector. Generally, no. Why nuclear bombs have such a big range of destruction? Because they're big bombs. Are there dark photons? Maybe that's dark matter, but we haven't detected them. Why does different wavelengths of light? I feel like that sentence is missing a verb. Do you believe in wormholes? Not really. Could you explain what energy is? I looked up definition of energy, but but they seem to be circular. So there's a technical definition of entropy, or of energy. Energy is a quantity, so it's just a number that we associate to a system. So you can associate the speed of a system, the temperature of a system, the energy of a system. It's just a number. Energy is a number, and it happens to be the number that stays the same when the laws of physics governing the system don't change over time. That's what energy is. How would entropy reset mechanisms work? It depends on the model, but the model that I'm working on, entropy resets because time is cyclic. How likely is it that string theory can unify the fundamental forces? I suspect not very likely because, as far as we can tell, supersymmetry doesn't exist. Why does my microwave turn everything into heat instead of my charger only converting 5% into heat? Well, the goal of a microwave is to heat things up. The goal of a charger is to not heat things up and instead to power something, right? How's group theory used in physics? It's used all over the place, especially, well, finite group theory is used in condensed matter physics where you have discrete symmetries. But continuous groups, Lie groups, these are used to describe spacetime and internal symmetries. So they are used to do quantum field theory, they're used to do general relativity, they're all over the place. How do we define spacetime? Mathematically, we define spacetime as a Mathematically, we define spacetime as a Lorentzian or a four-dimensional Lorentzian manifold equipped with a metric and Yeah, I guess that's it. It's a four-dimensional Lorentzian manifold. But more specifically, space-time like is unpacking that. What that means is that space-time is a way of describing a something with three dimensions of space, one dimension of time, and then a means by which you can measure distances and durations. How did you become a physicist? I went to what were you doing at 18? Well, I went to undergrad for 4 years, then I did a master's for 2 and a PhD for 5. By the way, spamming is not a good way to get me to answer your question, so please don't do that. If redshift continues with light in the universe, what do microwaves eventually become? They become radio waves. Do you see humanity ever achieving light speed travel? No, it seems like it's impossible. Do you think gravitational waves still provide sufficient insights to the Big Bang? I would hope so, but we need better gravitational wave detectors. Do you collect unemployment currently from your last job? No, because I worked outside of the United States. What do you think about the Great Attractor? And no, really. What? Well, the Great Attractor is probably just a big clump of galaxies that are behind the Milky Way. Can you describe in layman terms what a tachyon is? So prior to like maybe the 70s or 80s, a tachyon was like this hypothetical particle that just traveled faster than light. But now when we think of tachyons, we think of things called tachyonic instabilities. Tachyonic instabilities are basically kind of like opposite particles. So particles like to be at the bottom of a well, and so they vibrate back and forth, and that's kind of what a particle is. A tachyon is like at the top of a hill, and so it'll roll down and end up somewhere, and that's what the Higgs mechanism is. Does entropy have an actual value in a system, or is there just high and low? Yeah, you can quantify the entropy. Who gave this comedian a PhD in physics? Well, thank you. I appreciate that you think I'm funny. That's I love that for me. How often do you stream? I try to stream for a few hours every morning, every weekday morning. A PhD in physics don't talk like this. Oh, well, apparently they do. What are the lowest and highest forms of light energy we can detect? So we have a gamma ray telescope. It's called Fermi, and we have radio telescopes all over the place. So basically the whole spectrum. What do you think that you will find at the edge of the universe, good or evil? I don't think there is an edge of the universe. Is there more than one type of Higgs field? As far as we know, no, but a lot of people think, or a lot of kind of theoretical particle physicists think possibly. But we haven't detected it. Do we have any evidence that we live in a simulation? No. No, we do not. Is Pluto a planet? Given the arbitrary definition of planet, no. What exactly is time? Well, okay, so one way that you can define time is you can define it as the way of distinguishing between space-time events that are co-located. They're at the same place. But that's really dissatisfactory, because then, like, what's space-time? Well, that might be a fundamental question. It might just be, like, we just have to think, like, space-time is just a thing. Can you explain lumpy universe and your thoughts on dark energy? Well, so the universe is lumpy, right? There's galaxies in some places and no galaxies in other places. And answering why the universe is lumpy is a hard question. It's not so hard. The universe is lumpy because of gravity. Gravity tends to make things lumpy. However, gravity needs like some small seeds of lumpiness. And to explain why the universe had those small seeds, well, we can appeal to like quantum field theory. And in fact, the universe is significantly less lumpy than it should have been. And so to explain why the universe was less lumpy than we thought, we appeal to inflation. But inflation's kind of a hypothesis, so we still don't know whether that's actually true. On the other hand, dark energy is explaining why the universe's expansion is currently accelerating. Perhaps unrelated. Thoughts on string theory? I think it's beautiful, and I think it's a theory of gravity or a theory of everything in some universe, just not ours. The only physicist I know looks exactly like you. Well, maybe, do you know me? How do you explain to someone that Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, etc. aren't bad for you? Perhaps explain to them that they've been experiencing radio waves for their entire life, because if you can turn on your radio to listen to like the radio in your car to listen to music, then that means that those radio waves are all around you and have been for your entire life, and you've been fine. Does redshift happen because the light gets stretched by the expanding universe? Yes. How did we get to the moon without 11 fuel stops? We had a big ass rocket. Do you subscribe to general relativity times insofar as its fundamental dimension connected to time, or do you agree with quantum mechanics in which time and space are emergent properties of fields? Well, look, they can both be true. It could be that general relativity, well, okay, they can't both be true if you're saying that that space-time is fundamental. As far as I'm concerned, though, general relativity is a good description. It might not be the ultimate description, though. We are reaching stagnation in many research fields? No, we are not. Is it still accelerating? Yes, it is still accelerating. The acceleration is getting smaller, though, but it's still accelerating. What do you think of nuclear engineering? I don't know much about it. Didn't loop quantum gravity mostly get falsified? Not as far as I know. Can you explain galactic rotations, why it's not 50-50 distributed? Well, no, we don't know why. It could be I mean, like, we don't know that for certain. It could be a statistical fluke. It didn't reach 5 sigma significance, but it was pretty significant, so it's likely that there is an inhomogeneous or an anisotropy in galaxy rotations. The question is why? Well, maybe we live in a black hole, or maybe our universe underwent a mixed master expansion, or maybe our universe is a fractal. Like, there's a whole bunch of possible explanations. We just don't know. Or maybe it's because our galaxy is spinning. Was it unethical for Julian Bashir's parents to augment his DNA? In that universe, yeah. Does consciousness affect matter? It doesn't seem to, but maybe. If actual infinities exist, then it allows for things like Banach-Tarski paradox and Vitali sets. How do you deal with that? Well, no, that would require actual infinities in finite spaces. And I don't know if those exist. I just think that it's possible for the universe to be actually infinitely large. That doesn't seem like an issue. From Fear's interaction with the $5, if you could go back in time and share all you know about quantum physics with one person, who would it be, or would you opt out? Well, the thing is I'd be better served explaining something about relativity, but if it has to be about quantum physics, maybe I would explain decoherence to Einstein. And I'd explain the many worlds interpretation to Einstein, because then Einstein might not get this reputation of being anti-quantum physics. Is 30 too late to start studying physics? Well, it's never too late, but it might be harder to get a job. What is the importance of discovering the neutrino? Well, it meant that there was stuff more. So the neutrino was discovered in, like, what, the 50s or something like that, but it was predicted in the 20s, I want to say, maybe the 30s. And so the fact that it exists means that there's something beyond just electrons, protons, and neutrons, and that's a big deal. Does marine engineering contain a lot of physics? I don't know. You'd have to ask a marine engineer, right? A theory has a bunch of structure to it. Okay, that's not a question. But I see the 2 question I asked was avoided. I don't avoid questions. I just can't read all of them. But I can scroll up. Does a physicist believe in God? No, I don't believe in God, but some do. If gravity isn't attractive, why doesn't everything spiral into each other and crash and explode? Well, because things are also moving, and so if you're being attracted to something but you're moving, then you could, like, orbit around it. That's what an orbit is. What's beyond the Higgs field in your opinion? What's its source? I don't know what you mean by beyond. The Higgs field seems to be like a feature of our universe. Why would it be harder to get a job? Well, because you'd be starting late, and so, people tend to value young researchers because they have more time to flourish, if you will. Is the expansion of the universe faster than the speed of light? It's not measured in miles an hour. The expansion of the universe is essentially a doubling time. So it's expanding faster if it doubles more quickly. It's expanding slower if it doubles more slowly. The universe currently is expanding at a rate where it doubles approximately once every 10 billion years. Doubles in size. What's your favorite species in Star Trek, and why do you like them? Oh, that's a good question. I like Andorians a lot, but that's just because of Jeffrey Combs. And species 8472 is also really neat, and that's just because I thought that they were really creative with it. We were asking an oracle the secrets of the universe, like getting some kind of answer will achieve something. Well, no, I'm not an oracle, but some people are interested in learning stuff, and I have some answers. Do you personally know what dark matter is? No, nobody does. What's your favorite response to the Fermi paradox? The universe is big, humans are young. What do you know about entanglement islands? Nothing. I've not worked with that, no. Do you think intergalactic travel will become possible? If so, what would we require to do this? Well, so it's in principle possible. The trouble is that you have to be committed to long journeys. And we don't have the tech for it. What's a physicist think about Diddy? I don't know anything about it except that he was hosting like parties where like gross shitty things were happening. So like I'm inclined to think that he was a bad person. But I haven't looked into it at all, so you know. Do you think oh, I already answered that. Please explain the black cube. I have no idea what that's referring to. What's the most spiritual thing you believe in? I don't think I do. If the universe can double, how can it be infinite? Well, so look, it's a doubling size. The expansion is a local thing. So imagine that you have a cube. That's imagine that you have 4 ping pong balls, or 8 ping pong balls rather, arranged in a cube. And you just leave those 8 ping pong balls in empty space. Originally the cube is 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. If you come back in 10 billion years, it'll be 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters. That's what I'm saying. Now, the universe might still be infinite. It's neither here nor there. Conservation of energy, is it true or false? It's true in systems where the corresponding laws of physics don't change over time. One of those things includes like the way that we fundamentally measure distances, but in our universe, the way that we measure distances is fundamentally changing because the universe is expanding. I just noticed that I got some cash apps and my phone didn't vibrate. But here we are, so let's read some cash apps. Thank you guys for the cash apps, by the way. So from Juno, with the $8 for proof of 8. I don't know what that means. For proof of 8. 8 is a number. And Grimlock sends $10 for just because I can. Stay hydrated. All right, that sounds like an instruction, and I'll do it. Thank you for the cash app donations, guys. I appreciate it. Like I said, TikTok is currently paying the bills and will be until I get a job, which might be as late as, winter. So we'll see. What are your thoughts on the zero energy hypothesis? It's an interesting idea. I just don't know how you quantify energy in an expanding universe. Total energy, I should say. Do prime numbers pop up in physics very often? Yeah, 2 and 3 pop up all the time. What do you think of Bob Lazar element 115? Well, he was wrong about it. His predictions about it were wrong. It's not stable. How do you still research and publish without a job? Well, research is something, you don't need a job to do research. You just need a brain and resources. And by resources, I mean like, the background and the education. And you can publish without a job too. But it helps that I still have an affiliate position with the university I used to work for. So I'm still on their website. It just says affiliate researcher. It's just not that. So I still have my academic email. It's just not a paid position, of course. Do you ever get consumed by the fractal sets? No, not really. What do you like to research? Well, currently I'm really deep in cosmology. How many digits of pi do you know? 3.1415926. Maybe 5 is the next number. You have a new subscription? A new subscription? Thank you. Do you think energy is an actual entity or simply an abstract parameter? Yes, it's an abstract parameter. It's not an entity. What's the latest consensus on the double slit experiment? The double slit experiment is essentially fully understood. We understand it to be a quantum phenomenon where if the system is interacted with, then if you interact with the system in such a way that you have the witch slit information encoded in some macroscopic physical system, then the photon will only pass through that one physical system. And that's because of the way that you're interacting with it. And essentially the superposition kind of smearing out and becoming entangled, or becoming mixed, statistically mixed rather than superposed. But yeah, the modern physics, like the double slit is just not a very interesting thing in modern physics, like at least from a theoretical point of view. Vitali set, so I'm familiar with. I'd have to look into it. I'm not familiar with Vitali sets. I'm familiar with Banach sets though, like Banach-Tarski paradoxes. But GR is GR over time. That's not an issue. It's the distance measures that. Okay, that's not a question. Do you know why the fine structure constant is approximately 1/137? Who knows? We don't know. We don't know why. What effect has JWST had on our understanding of the early universe? I know it makes the dates of what we think stars and galaxies formed, but how does that affect the math in our predictions? It doesn't really. Like it changes how we understand galaxy formation and star formation, but beyond that, not much. Would it be possible for technology to eventually see tesseracts? No, that's a brain thing, and our brains are dumb. Should I get a bachelor's in physics, or would it be harder to find a job? If you get a bachelor's in physics because you like physics, do it. But if you're doing it just for a job, you'll have a better chance if you get a master's as well. Explain the operation of the Leonardo ECAP power system. Oh, it's fake. It's fake. That's the operation. If the universe keeps expanding, we'll never encounter aliens? Well, no, there might be aliens in our galaxy. Have you read Project Hail Mary? I haven't, no. Do you have to be very smart for physics? I don't know. Can you explain the classical explanation for the double slit experiment? There isn't one. It's a quantum phenomenon. Will gravity always only be a theory? Gravity is a few things. Gravity is an observed fact, right? It is a law in the form of Newton's law, and it's a theory in the form of Einstein's theory of general relativity. They're three different things, so you have to tell me which one you're referring to. Do you think that spooky action at a distance in quantum locking could help make time travel possible? No, not at all. Can't you have a different variant of element 115 that is stable? We just haven't created yet. The thing about creating elements is that it's easiest to create the most stable ones for kind of obvious reasons, right? So the ones that we created is almost certainly the most stable. Also, the thing about, like, we know a lot about nuclear physics, and nuclear isotopes that have an even number of protons and an even number of neutrons are almost explicitly always more stable than ones with an odd number. So in particular, 115 would be less stable than 114 and 116. Here's what actual infinities. I'd have to look into Vitali sets to read about them. What programming languages do you use? I use Python. I know Python, and I used to be fluent in Java, but I don't use them regularly. Do you leave room for the possibility of a higher power? It depends on which higher power. Generally, no. I'm an atheist. Do you think we have gravitic propulsion? No. Spooky action at a distance proves telepathy. How can anyone not get that? Well, no, it doesn't. Spooky action at a distance is not even, like, proven, right? You don't know SQL? No, I've never used it. What percentage of nuclear refinement is required for naval reactors? I read online that you need like 20%, but I don't know if that's true. Should I become a physicist or an engineer? It depends on what you want to do. Is a black hole actually a hole in space-time or just a dense star too massive to allow light to escape? We don't know, but I kind of lean towards the latter. J. Robert Oppenheimer did the right thing to build the first nuclear bomb for human race. Oh, I don't know. That counterfactual is really hard. Because on the one hand, like, it was a horrible war crime to drop 2 bombs in Japan. On the other hand, mutually assured destruction has been a powerful force and probably kept the Cold War cold. And who knows what World War III would have looked like if World War II didn't end with nuclear bombs. So it's hard to say. Dina, thank you for resubscribing. I love that. I love that for you. Have you heard of the 4-5 state of matter? No, I've never heard of that. What uni did you go to? I'm not telling you. What's the best way to become a physicist? Get a PhD in physics. Where would a physicist be employed? Typically at universities or national labs. Although I heard from a friend that the theoretical physics division at the Los Alamos National Lab, which is a really well-respected national lab and had a really well-respected theoretical physics division, I heard that the theoretical physicists are just being pushed into just engineering. Like they're just not physicists anymore. Like you either quit or you become an engineer. They're canceling that division, which is really, really bad. You you think the Japanese were the ones who suffered war crimes? Well, no, I mean the US did war crimes by dropping nuclear bombs on Japan, and Japan did war crimes to a whole bunch of other people. Like both sides can do war crimes. Like turns out it's not a zero-sum game. If I go to Harvard, can I hide that I went to Harvard? I guess you could. You probably shouldn't though, because it's like the best university in the world, right? A lot of physics people in finance now. Yes, that's true. Could countries have organized around global trade interdependence without nuclear deterrence? Maybe. But the thing is the Soviet Union, as far as I know, was not particularly interested in doing global trade with the US. But maybe. It's really hard to answer if how the world would have been different, right? Um, can I be a physicist with a master's? Well, yeah, but you'll have a hard time getting a research job with a master's at a university, I should state. Um, how would we know if superposition exists if we cannot observe it? Well, so the thing is there are some interpretations of quantum mechanics where superposition doesn't exist. On the other hand, most interpretations assume superposition exists because we can have things like interference. Surely there is superposition in the wave function. The question is the wave function a description of the thing that we're seeing, or is the wave function just guiding the thing that we're seeing? The Bohm interpretation of quantum mechanics, the Bohmian interpretation, says the wave function is just guiding a particle, and the particle's never in a superposition. Have you ever met someone at MIT who studied physics? No. Well, I mean, maybe, but I don't know. I'm sure I didn't ask. What's your take on block universe theory? It's sort of what's expected if you take general relativity seriously. Why would they be becoming engineers to actually build? Well, no, they're just they're just taking everybody, they're reassigning everybody in the theoretical physics division and assigning them to an engineering division. That's what's happening. What's the average cooking time for a creationist? I have one in the fridge. I mean, asking for a friend. It depends. 10 to 15 minutes, though, is probably a good amount of time in a high-power microwave. What do you think of Physics for Dummies books? I haven't read them, so I can't really comment. If someone, can you explain quantum entanglement to me like I'm 5? This is a tired analogy, but the best thing I can do is imagine that you have a pair of shoes. There's a left shoe and a right shoe. Quantum entanglement is just this idea that if you have the left shoe, you know that the other shoe is always the right shoe. At least that's a way of thinking about quantum entanglement, but it doesn't capture the full story. Do you believe in the Big Bang? Well, yeah, the Big Bang, like, we have very strong evidence the Big Bang is a thing that happened, and is still happening in a sense. Is exotic matter realistic? Not as far as we know. May I pop in to ask a couple black hole cosmology questions? Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, I can hear you all right. What questions you got for me?
A couple questions about black hole cosmology.
Sure.
And maybe one about cosmic cyclic cosmology.
Mm-hmm.
So with black hole cosmology, I often hear about this whole idea of a kind of natural selection process for universes that favor stellar formation.
Yep.
And the premise of it is that you would have different physics in each black hole. How and why do we think that you'd get new physics from our current theory of it?
As far as I know, there's no justification ever given for that.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then another is, does black hole cosmology predict some kind of curvature to the universe? Can the universe be infinite? Or does
so black hole cosmology does typically predict that well, okay, it depends on what you mean by the universe. Do you mean the universe in the black hole, or do you mean the universe outside the black hole? Yeah, so the universe in the black hole would then be finite, right? And it could have like some closed topology or something like this. But yeah, the universe in that case would be finite. That doesn't mean that it has an edge, by the way. It just means that it's finite in the sense that it's like the surface of the Earth is finite, but it doesn't have an edge.
Right.
But yeah, so that said, the actual details of black hole cosmology are really not worked out in a whole lot of details. People are kind of just like, I made a video on this recently, but the rough gist is that people have like done some small theoretical tests and they're like, well, maybe if this is the case, then maybe it'll work. But it's not like super well formalized, because it turns out black hole physics are really hard.
Right. Okay, thank you. And then the one question I had about Penrose's cosmic cyclic, or whatever, cyclic
CCC,
conformal. Yeah, CCC. So my understanding of it was just that if you have proton decay and matter decay in general, then sense of distance loses any meaning, and it's mathematically equivalent whatever size the universe is.
Yep.
From that, what happens to the old space-time when a new universe would emerge in that model?
It's the same space-time in some sense. It's just kind of like when all scale disappears, it may as well be infinitely small or infinitesimally small. So it's the same
So in a
universe.
sense, you'd have a bubble of matter, and then beyond that is just some functionally infinite amount of nothing.
No, this wouldn't be a localized thing. This would happen everywhere.
Can you help me understand how that
Yeah, so the
works?
idea is so suppose that proton and electron, because you also need electron decay, by the way. Although
Right.
Penrose disagrees, but most of us think that you need electron decay. Basically, you need to end up with a universe that's just light and gravitational waves. Um,
Mhm.
but in such a universe, there is no sense of distance. So the entire universe would be would be mathematically described identically, whether it was very big or very small. And so at that moment, when the entire universe is that way, then it may as well be infinitesimally small, and now you have a Big Bang. But it'd be the whole
Okay.
universe, not just like a bubble.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Um, all right. Thank you. That was all the cosmology questions I had.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Bye.
Okay, didn't miss any cash apps. That's good. I didn't miss any super chats. That's good. You guys are so generous today, though. I appreciate you. I appreciate you loads. Is life an illusion? Well, I guess not. Would the black hole at the center of our galaxy be a logic meetup location for advanced aliens? Get moving through the universe is very, very hard. Like it's really tricky. So I don't know. Most interesting thing for you in classical physics. It's general relativity. General relativity is a classical theory. We as Earthlings and science trustees and believers know how much these massive things weigh. Okay, that's not a question. Are the ghosts in Gettysburg real? I don't know. Probably not. Is Terrence Howard a leading authority on such subjects? He's a leading authority on nothing. Wait, when and why do particles become entangled? They become entangled anytime that there's a mutual interaction between them. That's what leads to entanglement. Could you please diagram that response to guests sometime? It's hard to diagram because in diagrams you have a sense of scale, right? And the point is that at that point you have no sense of scale. Your solution to the Fermi paradox: universe big, universe young. What are the ideas for why we observe different rates of acceleration or for expansion last year? Different rates of acceleration? You mean the Hubble tension? You're asking why there's Hubble tension? That's a great question. Nobody knows. Is Eric Weinstein an idiot or a con man or both? I think he's a con man. I think he doesn't think he's a con man, but I think that he is basically grifting. Can objects out of the observable universe exert gravitational forces? Yeah, they can exert. So you can have like two galaxies, one that's on the edge, one which is outside the observable universe, and the other which is inside the observable universe, and they can have a gravitational attraction on them. But the thing outside the observable universe shouldn't be able to have a gravitational attraction on us now. Do you believe in infinite regress causally or only temporally? If causally, then wouldn't the entire causal dependent chain need an explanation outside itself? I think that language of cause and effect in a philosophical sense is outdated. What do you think about string theory and how far are we from applying it as a mathematical concept to real world physics? String theory seems like it probably doesn't apply to our universe, but it applies to some universe, just not ours. Yo, do you think spacetime is real, as in these are real substances, presentism? So I take B theory seriously because that's an implication from general relativity, which as far as we can tell is true. But I don't know if spacetime's like fundamental. It seems real, but I don't know if it's fundamental. Could we theoretically send a telescope pointed at the Earth into a black hole and see future Earth? Send a telescope pointed at the Earth into a black hole. Presumably you mean to near a black hole. Yeah, but then you would have to wait for the signal to get all the way back to you, which would take the same amount of time. Do you usually blend philosophy with science? It depends. If in like my work as a physicist, not really. In like a live chats, sure. Is there tangible evidence supporting the general theory of quantum mechanics? Yes. Your cell phone. Do you think, what do you, if the CMBR is 13.8 billion light years away from us, then how can we say no, the CMBR is not 13.8 billion light years away from us. It's 13.8 billion years old. It's about 46 billion light years away from us. What are the quantum measurements that cause branches in many worlds? So it's not like some discrete thing. The worlds are not like some discrete thing. They're just like a way of thinking about orthogonal components of the wave function. But the idea is that whenever you have a superposition, like a microscopic superposition kind of spread out amongst the, like via decoherence amongst the macroscopic system, we would call that a branching moment. So it's just an interaction between a macroscopic and a microscopic system. Can you explain how cell phones use quantum mechanics? So transistors, modern transistors and modern cell phones rely on a good understanding of quantum mechanics in order to make sense of it, in order to make sense of how those transistors work because they're so small. Can you answer my question, please? Can metaphysics be explained by science? Probably not, but it should be guided by science at least. Thoughts on Penrose's CCC? Almost everybody thinks that it's not true. It seems to be fraught with a lot of problems. How many physicists decided to pursue mechanical engineering? I don't know. Thoughts on determinism? I'm a determinist. So what does Neil deGrasse Tyson consistently explain wrong with the wrong assumptions? I don't really watch much of his stuff, so I don't know. Do you ever look up at the stars at night and wonder what it all means? Yeah, sometimes. What theories do you think are misnamed and lead people to misunderstand them? The observer effect? Poorly named. The Big Bang? Also pretty poorly named. Jorge sent me $25. Thanks for supporting scientists. Well, of course, Jorge. And you're the one supporting the scientists. I'm just the one talking, right? I appreciate you, Jorge. Jorge's a friend. And by the way, if you see Jorge somewhere in the chat, go follow him. He's a brilliant science communicator. Love his stuff. He's really, really good. He's also a physicist who transitioned to industry. What kind of B theory would you lean towards? I didn't know that there were different kinds. The kind where you have space-time realism, I guess. What does it imply if someone were a lifelong segment of their life in pursuit of humanism? I don't know, that they're a good person, I guess. Do you have ADHD? Do meds help with understanding concepts, and were you always good at physics and math? I do have ADHD. Meds do help. Actually, you just reminded me. This is how you know I have ADHD, by the way. No wonder. I forgot to take them. Oops. Good thing it's only 10:30. Rest in peace, my day, I guess. At what age did you start ADHD medication? I was like 11 or something. Yeah, thanks for the reminder. I appreciate you. What part of the States did you move back to? I'm in Arizona. Physics scholar caught doing drugs on camera. No, I did not. I was not caught doing drugs. Did you have to try a lot of different meds? Yeah, but I did find one that works really well. So I've been on that for a while. Yes, it is 5 pence. Yeah. Do you talk even faster without the ADHD meds? No, I just am less productive. I forgot. So, okay, this is actually kind of funny. No, actually, it's kind of mean. It's funny, but mean, so never mind. How hot is it in Arizona? Right now, it's 98 degrees, I guess. Do you like Arizona? Black holes create gravitational waves. To be honest, everything does, like a bobbing buoy in a wake. We can only really measure them with modern tech when two black holes merge together in a very... Yeah, okay, that's true. Not a question, though. What's the most harmful misconception about the world or physics? That theories are just guesses. Been off my ADHD meds since elementary school, wish I wasn't. Yeah, that's fair. So you were always good at math and physics. I was always good at math. I was always interested in physics. But I didn't take any physics classes until university. But I always I read like The Brief History of Time. I read various books by Brian Greene and stuff. How has physics changed your perspective on life? I think of things pretty mechanistically, which, maybe is a bad thing. Probably get this question all the time or not. A creator or not a creator? I don't think there is one. Maybe not directly your field, but do you see us colonizing other planets in our lifetimes? I think that we should fix our planet first. Let's put it that way. Have I ever been to the Lola Observatory? No, but now that I have more time, maybe I will. Maybe I should / will. Hey boss, dealing with ADHD as an adult. Are you still on meds, or have you found a way to live without? Tired of stimulants ruling my life. I have been medicated since I was like 11, and it works for me. And it doesn't. If I'm not on them, it doesn't work otherwise. So this is just my lot in life. I take them every morning, and then I can be a normal person, right? Medicaid doesn't cover Vyvanse. That's bad. I'm gonna be on Medicaid soon. Oops. And I take Vyvanse. Notorious with $5. Thank you. I'm glad you're not doing the pretentious convince me God is real stream. Not everybody needs to be convinced God is real information content. Look, so I do those lives because they're interesting for me. If they're not interesting for you, you don't have to watch. I don't know how it's pretentious, though, to ask for conversations where someone wants to convince me to believe in their God. That's not pretentious. I'm just saying, look, if you think that you can convince me, come up and let's talk about it. If you have a problem with that, you can scroll. You don't have to watch all of my content. It's not for everybody. Can you explain compressed at near light speed? Yeah, so things get smaller. If something is this wide and is traveling very, very fast relative to you, it'll look smaller. Well, it won't look smaller, but it'll measure smaller. That's the important distinction. Now, why that's the case, we can go into a thought experiment to explain it. But it seems to be a fundamental feature of our universe. Did you find a job in the States? Nope, I did not. We're going to be reapplying in a few months. And actually, there was a job that opened up at, where is it? A job that opened up at Baylor that I'm going to apply to probably today. So we'll see. Why is light affected by gravity even though it doesn't have mass? Because gravity is just the bending and warping of space-time. So, and light travels through space-time, so its feature, so the path that it takes through space-time will be affected. It is very pretentious because the only thing you'll fall back on 100% of the time is where's the evidence that argument. Look, if you think that me asking for evidence of a claim that someone wants to convince me of is pretentious, that's fine. I don't think it's pretentious to ask for evidence because that's how we do that. I think that that's a source of good epistemology. What makes capital letters attention-seeking? That's a great question. I have no idea. You get a lot of questions about popular physics, so I'd wager you answer a lot of the same ones. Is there anyone in particular that you always answer and never skip? Favorite pop sci fact? No, I actually don't know if I have a favorite one. But I do answer a lot of the same questions. That's true. Grimlock with the $5. Have you ever checked out the Biosphere 2 in Arizona? When I was a kid, because I grew up here, when I was a kid, we took a field trip to the Biosphere 2, which was really neat. Also kind of weird, but it was really neat. Medicaid is covered by generic Vyvanse, which is fine. I don't care if it's generic or name brand. It's good that it's covered by Medicaid. That's good. That's good. Well, for one, it's just not interesting. To you, it's not interesting. For other people, it is. That's a personal preference. Like, look, like I find the conversations that it leads to be interesting. I find I find a lot of different conversations interesting. So I do it because I find it interesting. If you don't like it, that's okay. You don't have to like it. Nobody's asking you to. You can scroll. Are you concerned about AI? To an extent, yeah. But actually, I found that it can be a super useful source for people who are using it in a professional setting. So I'm not going to slam it. How do you do research though? Well, a lot of my research lately has been reading and trying to put together a story for a model that I'm working out. So it's a lot of reading, a lot of calculations, a lot of by hand calculations that I've had to do lately. Because up until yesterday, I was missing out on a piece of software that I would typically do. So let me show you the calculations I was doing by hand the other day. Like these kinds of calculations. And it's just pages of this. And more. And more. Like it's just pages and pages of it, which is really frustrating. But I got the software, so now I don't have to do them all by hand anymore. Which is nice. Big Donut 64 with the $2. Thank you. Could Superman fly by changing his mass? Well, the thing is regardless of how much mass you have, you always fall. So no. Do you think we're close to AGI? I have no idea. Have you considered working in finance? If by considered you mean be disgusted by it, yes. When What do you think is the most plausible theory for the origin of the universe? I tend to think that the universe has always existed. Just double checking that I got a cash app that I missed. Oh no, that's from Jorge. What branch of math is heavily used in your research? Differential geometry, primarily. What do you think about superdeterminism? I don't like it. It might be true, but I don't like it. Who's your favorite mainstream science educator? Matt O'Dowd from PBS Spacetime. He's so good. I will be volunteering for a physics Olympiad. What foundations do you reckon I start? I never did the physics Olympiad, so I don't know. I have no idea. What software did I get? I got Maple. It's a free trial. It's 1,400. Here's a great time for me to shill myself out, or not shill myself out. Beg for money, if you will. So Maple, it's called Maple. The software is called Maple. It's a computer algebra system. It's owned by a company called MapleSoft. I used to have access because I had institutional access. Now I don't. And I needed a new license for my computer at home anyway. And it's $1,400 for a new license. Now I have a 14-day free trial, which will end in 12 days. So if anybody wants to support me getting MapleSoft so I can be more efficient with my research and publish more papers, there's a Cash App in the description or something. So yeah, that's it. It's similar to Mathematica, but it's the software that I'm familiar with, and it has the tools that I need. So yeah, there's me, groveling for support because Maple is very expensive. I hate that it's so expensive. I'm pretty sure that if Superman changes mass in a pattern, that produces a directional emission of radiation, gravitational EM, he could fly like that. Maybe, yeah. Do you need any specific tool? So the only software I use, so there's one piece of software I use called Form, which is free, and I have it. And then I use Maple. Those are the two pieces of software that I use. The rest I use pen and paper, really. Like a directional array. Yeah, maybe. Is Maple a subscription-based software or one-time buy? So as it stands right now, there is a subscription, but I'm going to just do the one-time buy for just a permanent license. It just means I won't get updates. But yeah, so it's $1,400 for the first year. You get a license for $800, and then you get the download for $800 and the license for $600, and then it's $600 every year after if you want to keep updates. But I don't need that. I just need like I was running on the 2015 version for 10 years. So Jacob with the Galaxy, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I appreciate the support. I just started my PhD in theoretical physics. However, funding for my program was cut. Any advice? The same advice that I give to everybody. I don't have any advice. This is a really bad time to be a scientist. Like, it's just really bad. Unfortunately. At least in the US. How much paper do you use? I haven't set it up yet because I moved and I haven't unpacked it all yet. But I go through a notebook about this size, depending on what I'm doing, of course. But I go through a notebook about this size once every few months. And I label them. So I keep all my research notebooks. This one's I started in April, and I have I didn't do a whole lot of research in May because I was moving, but I have this much left. This much. So I've used about 2/3 of the book in 3 months. And I try to get a notebook from every place I go, every new country I go to, or every new city. I accidentally deleted this, sorry. I think earlier you said black holes were what got you into physics. Was the reconstructed picture of the black hole in 2017 huge and exciting? Yeah, it was just a big deal. It was all of the pictures that I'd seen as a kid just made me feel things when I saw that picture in 2017. It was just meaningful to me. It was also a huge deal for science, but it was meaningful for me. $5 from Yakov. Thank you. An always existing universe requires an infinite regressive causes and effects. It's illogical. Oh, I don't think that that's illogical, but okay. Where are we currently on inflation? Any new developments or theories recently? So I'm not super into the inflation research. People it's super active, so people work on it all the time. It's just not something I know a lot about because I'm more fringe, I guess. I don't really like inflation. I get that it's a really, really good answer to the. I don't like inflation as a model of origins. I like inflation as an idea to explain homogeneity, but I don't like it as a model of origins. And so I'm just not into, like, the cosmology that I like is a lot more fringe because I like exploring I like exploring like new mathematical ideas. So I do kind of fringier cosmology. Like I'm building a cosmological model now that is like obviously super fringe. Um, but like I'm trying to explore like a toy model for like certain kind of behavior to see if it's possible to get that behavior. I don't think so is a non-answer. Look, so if you want to claim that something is a logical Yakov, then you should show the contradiction. If you can't show the contradiction, then it just is a vibes-based position. Also, to be clear, causes and effects are just not a thing. That's not how we do. That's not how we talk about physics anymore. We don't talk about physics in terms of cause and effects. That's like 2,000 years out of date. I worked at a science museum at the time the black hole picture came out, and it was awesome. Yeah, that would be awesome. Why would it not be illogical? The present would never be reached if the past is infinite. The present would never be reached from when? If you take a B theory of time approach, the block universe theory, the block universe of time, block time. I can't talk. If you take seriously that space-time, that the entirety of space-time exists equally, then there's just no issue with all moments of space-time being equally realized. So like the block theory of time just completely like dismantles any causal infinite regress business. Like it just doesn't work. Which is why physicists don't make that claim. It's like theologians and philosophers that make that claim who don't understand, relativity. Is there a minimum we can reduce dead time in a scintillator silicon? No, I don't know. That's an experimental physics question. Go ask Quantanaut. Quantanaut is an experimental physics grad student and actually you can go ask Dr. Ibrahim now, Blackbird Physics. He's also an experimental physicist. They both do experimental particle physics. I subscribed and I'm thrilled to find your channel. Welcome. Thank you for doing that. By the way, if you're watching on TikTok or on YouTube, make sure to follow along, subscribe, do all of these things. I do these twice a week. How many years of education do you have after high school? 11. But the last 5 of it was more like not hands-on, but the last 5 of it was more like research rather than like sitting in a classroom, right? Cause and effect is epistemological, not physics. Yeah, but this notion of cause and effect is, well, okay, no. There is an ontology of cause and effect that people talk about, but yeah, all right. What's your moral opinion on Oppenheimer? I don't think he was a bad guy. I think that it's I don't know. If I condemned Oppenheimer, I feel like I would have to condemn all of the early physicists. And I think doing physics, when asked by your country in what you're told is an existential threat, I don't think that that's like it's definitely not good, but I don't think that he was like a monster. And I think that the fact that he regretted it makes him more morally good, if you will. What do you think of Eric Weinstein? Is his theory valid? No, it's not, and I think he's a grifter. So, what do you think about infinite zoom in between 2 points beyond Planck length? As far as we know, you can't really do that, because if you tried to, you'd end up with a black hole blocking your view. Are there any theory that you believe that in the general consensus does not have a full grasp of yet? Not really. I don't think he cares about YouTube Co. I'm literally answering YouTube questions and TikTok questions. There's just a lot of them. Is it possible to come up for a moment and ask questions? I might be ending the live soon, so probably not. If our universe is inside a supermassive black hole, is it emitting Hawking radiation? It would, yeah, if that were the case. What is time made of? That's like asking what's space made of. As far as we know, it's not made of anything. It's just a feature of systems. How close are we to discovering gravitons? I suspect very far. Could scientists perfectly simulate the entire universe in a computer down to the last atom? No. I actually have a video about this from a while ago. It went kind of viral. It would be impossible. It's impossible to do that within the universe. Why do the laws of physics exist? Great question. Maybe they have to. When you do research, you only focus on the maths, or you imagine what you're doing? Oh, it depends on what I'm working on. If I'm working on a math project, then I just focus on the math. Otherwise, I am like thinking about physics. Like the current project I'm working on, I had a physics idea, and I had to find the math to make it work. And so yesterday I actually did find the math that makes it work. Have you had time to check out David Tong's new textbooks? No, I haven't. I can attest to answers to YouTube questions he's answered like 4 of mine. Yeah, see, there you go. Did you see the guy? Did you see the guy on TikTok talking about how rockets don't work in space? Yeah, there are a lot of them. They're called flat earthers, and they're very funny. Can physics laws change? In principle, they could, but then that would just make it seem like there's another more fundamental law that describes how the physics laws change. What did you write your thesis on? Conformal hypersurface geometry. Is it possible that the so-called quantum vacuum is just a rebranded ether, and if not, what's the physical distinction? Well, in some sense it is, but it has very different properties from the ether as described in the 1800s. So the ether as described in the 1800s provides a universal rest frame, whereas the quantum vacuum doesn't. The quantum vacuum is Lorentz invariant, meaning that it is the same in every reference frame. Also, it's not made of a substance, if you will. It's like the fundamental objects are quantum fields. So, but in some sense, you could think of it like an ether, yeah. But the ether kind of, but then the quantum fields kind of sit on top of the spacetime. You got a PhD? Yeah, 3 years ago. What are your opinions on Neil deGrasse Tyson? He's one of the best science communicators of our day. He's very, very good. How does determinism work without cause and effect? You just have laws of physics. You have evolution of those. You have evolution of systems according to those laws. You don't have to invoke like A causes B causes C. You just have evolution equations. What would be the implications be if we discovered that the filter we use for the CMB has been obscuring the answer to dark matter, dark energy? Well, we don't really use a filter for the CMB. The point is that we look at the universe in all wavelengths that we have access to. And it's just, if we want to look at the CMB, we look at it in one wavelength. If we want to look at something else, we look at it in another wavelengths. But if the CMB wavelength that we were looking at it in, microwaves, was obscuring dark matter or dark energy, then we would be seeing it in the other wavelengths that we look at the sky in. I'm of the opinion that the shape of the universe is toroidal. It's plausible. We don't have any evidence that supports it yet, though. Can you act like we're all sort of mentally slow and we don't understand all the rhetoric and all those variables? I don't know what that means. How the philosophy of physics changed your view and interaction with the world? It didn't really. Have you ever studied the physics of baseball? Not really. How can we get politics to help science? You first have to elect politicians that care about science. Unfortunately, that's the first step. What does a physicist do? Physics. So what that means is that we write papers. Depending on what kind of physicist you are, you might do experiments. You might construct new models to understand something that we don't understand yet. That's the job. Is that the Invincible font? I don't know. I just picked a font. Is the world flat? No. Why do we experience time flowing in one direction? It might be just because that's the direction that entropy increases in. Why can a bumblebee fly? I don't know. Why isn't a physics question? How is centripetal force taken as a substitute for gravitation? It's not. So many holes in physics. Like what? Why does my spaghetti make lightning when I put it in the microwave? That's a really good question. Are you putting it in there with a metal bowl? Do you work for a private company or university? Currently, I work for myself. That's it. Have you heard the scientists think that the universe... No, scientists don't think that. One guy wrote a paper, and he said, oh, maybe this is likely. But, like, this is not, like, a consensus, no. It was, like, one guy. You can't solve problems of my research, so we can't ask anything, only something. What? What are your thoughts on the brain in a vat theory? I think that it is cognitively unstable. Google that if you don't like it. If two atoms of hydrogen are 1 centimeter apart at t equals 0, when will they be 1 millimeter apart? That's it's a more complicated question than you might think. But we could do the math if you wanted to, but I'm not going to do that. So freelance, yes. So most physicists most working physicists either work at national labs or universities. People who are doing genuine physics. There are physicists who work in industry, but most of the time they're kind of doing engineering work. Um, I should say most physicists who do physics research. I was working at a university up until the end of April. Then my contract ended. Now I'm looking for a new job. So currently my income is TikTok, and then I do research as kind of like a side gig that I do so I can improve my CV, so I can get a job. I have a better shot of getting a job later. Um, Sorry, I just thought I got a cash app that I should answer. Should we look again at spectral geometry for emergent gravity time, SM, standard model, etc.? You'd have to be more specific. Is the universe expanding? Where is it going? Expansion is a local thing, right? So it doesn't matter if the universe has edges or not. It doesn't have edges, by the way. But it doesn't matter if the universe has edges or not. It could still be expanding. Because it just means that if you take a cubic meter of space now, in 10 billion years, it'll be 8 cubic meters of space. What does the physics community think of Eric Weinstein? Generally, we don't take him seriously whatsoever. How to write a good cover letter for a PhD? Oh, I don't know. I don't know how successful. I got accepted into 2 grad schools out of 7, so make of that what you will. What does local mean in physics? It means nearby. If you don't believe in cause and effect, then what's the alternative? Well, just physics. The dynamical systems. What's the radius of an electron? Is the already point is not an answer. It doesn't have one. It's not a ball. It's also not a point. Star in a Jar projects were popular on the internet for a while, and Doug Coulter had a brief popularity for his shed reactor. Anyways, are we any closer to a fusion reactor? We are closer, but it still might be a long ways off. Why doesn't the universe have edges if we're stuck in a black hole? Almost certainly we are not stuck in a black hole. That's not the scientific consensus. How far does gravity reach? If it was just me and the Earth and the universe, could I escape Earth's gravity? Depends on what the universe is doing. If the universe is expanding, then yes, you could. However, if the universe is just kind of static and it's just empty and it's just you and Earth, then no, you can never escape its gravity. Is the God particle an overblown concept because of the public attention it received, or is it a well-respected finding that pushed physics forward a decent amount? So the God particle, it's called the Higgs boson. The God particle is just a name that Leon Letterman gave it in the 90s. Is a really big idea, a really big deal, because if it didn't exist, then our standard model would be wrong, which is important. In fact, it was so important that there was a Nobel Prize awarded for its discovery, or for its theoretical prediction, rather. So very, very important. Yakov with the $2 says, non-answer is incorrect on my end. My bad, bud. Well, I appreciate you. I feel like I'm hearing something. Who's Eric Weinstein? Don't worry about him. Do you know for a fact that the Earth is not flat? Yeah, as much as I know that the sun will rise tomorrow. Isn't our ability to understand physics limited due to our limited brain capacity? Possibly, yeah. What historic science figure do you think was overrated? Nikola Tesla. Not even a scientist, and people overrate him. I don't understand how atomic spin isn't spin, but an expression or property like mass velocity. So atomic spin can literally be spin. It can literally be an electron that has like a rotational component to its orbital. However, fundamental spin, like the spin that electrons have, that is an intrinsic property, and it's very confusing, but it's allowed. It's allowed by the way that we understand physics. So, all right, y'all. It has been almost 2 hours, so I think I'm going to end the live here. But thank you guys all for the donations. Thank you guys all for the questions, for liking the live, for following along. I appreciate you guys just a lot. So tune in tomorrow. We'll be back to some debates. I know some of you guys like the debates. I know some of you guys like this, but we do this every Tuesday and every Wednesday. Well, at least we do this every Wednesday. Yeah, so I'll see you guys next time. Have a good rest of your Wednesday.